Good morning, Michelle, and welcome to the Brag. It's so great to have you here. Really been excited about this one because I think it's great when you get to add some data to this this fight in terms of women's rights in the workplace and especially as entrepreneurs. So really excited about this one. Um, yeah, let's just get stuck right in.
Okay, I'm
So
delighted to be here on the Brag, Leah. Very excited. I think it's a wonderful initiative and it's really needed.
thank you.
So, yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that. All right. So, Michelle, you've conducted groundbreaking research on women's self-promotion in the workplace. What sparked your passion for researching women's career development, and what did you witness in your own senior management career that made you think, something needs to change here?
Yeah, actually, what sparked my interest really was initially what I witnessed. When I was working in industry, I saw so many women not pushing themselves forward. And these would be women who expressed a desire to progress. But then when the opportunities arose, they would stand back or hold themselves back. And I suppose what I saw was that a lot of the time I could see that men were able to do it no problem.
Yeah.
And I would love what my desire was that you could help women have that same self belief men would have. So I went into Waterford, SCTU in Waterford,
Yeah.
on my first day of studies with that idea that I'd love to help women have better self belief. And I just knew then that was what I wanted to research. And when I started to research, I found that our self belief is a huge factor in our career development. And it's actually more important even than our ability. Because even when we have the ability, we can't really progress without the self belief. And unfortunately, research finds that women tend to suffer lower self belief than men. And I suppose we see that often when we hear women saying that, no, I'm not going to apply for the job because I can only do 9 out of the 10 things.
Yeah.
And then we hear our male colleagues saying, oh, sure, look, yeah, I could only do 4 or 5 out of the 10, but I applied anyway, Um, so I felt, okay, this is an area that something can be done in. So that's really where it started.
Amazing. And it's yeah, and it's not something that's really going away either, right? It's we think that we've progressed, but then
No, there's still a lot of work. There's still a lot of work and still a lot of issues, I suppose, out there that, yep. And so it means
100%.
just that things can be done. There's still work to be done.
Yes, I think so. And we'll get into a little bit more on a question later, but even my own experience of after you have kids and the negative kickback that you get from that, and then that creates another cycle of self-belief starting to go down because of the issues that arise from that experience. So I've definitely seen it
Absolutely.
firsthand what can happen there. um
Yeah.
and then personal vulnerability. One of your most powerful discoveries was around self-doubt and self-belief. Can you share a personal example of when you've experienced this self doubt? I know it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, but it does help everyone feel less alone, as you know.
Sure. I'll just give you a tiny background. I suppose what came across very clearly in my study was that the women had high self belief. Now, these were women aged 46 and above, and they'd largely progressed within their careers. So that's understandable. However, actually, just to give an example, I've written a
Yeah,
few examples down
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Susan, at the time I met her, was after recently going for an interview in financial services. And she was talking about that. And she said, not only could I do my job, I could do my boss's job and most likely his boss's as well. And that came across loud and clear. But also, what was interesting, as you said, was that most of the women talked about having self doubt. And they described that as occurring from time to time, as opposed to always being there. It just crept up when they encountered challenges. And women's first reaction, and one of my women, Olivia, said that women's first reaction when presented with a challenge is often, no, I can't do that. So just to bring that to a personal example, about 6 months ago, I was in work and I was asked to represent work and to be the media correspondent on a particular area. And my first reaction was, no, I can't do that. It was actually to do with the budget. So it was
Well,
before the budget, it was last September.
yeah.
And I went, no, I can't do that. And I started thinking, okay, who'd be better at doing that than me? And because of my research, I stopped and I went, oh my God, this is the perfect example of
Yeah.
self doubt, and how it can just stop you and how it can actually prevent you from taking that challenge that you might love or whatever.
Mm.
So that was the first reaction. All right. Yeah.
Wow. There you go. And that's a perfect example of how knowledge is power, right? Because you had that
Yeah.
knowledge from your research, you were able to take that step back and have an objective view on the situation. Um,
Exactly. Whereas in the past, I might have let it go and I might have
yeah,
actually just, I suppose, succumbed to that first reaction of no.
yeah, exactly. And then months later, you go, why did I? What?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
many people can relate. I've had that many times where I've passed up opportunities because I'm fixated on, completing a certain task that's probably below me, but I'm not thinking about the bigger picture and how I could actually do very well in this progression, and all coming back again to the, like you said, self-doubt. And then the transformation. Uh, so what did you do after recognizing this pattern in yourself? How did you tackle your own self doubt? And how empowering was that transformation?
Okay, so I decided to step back a little bit and analyze it. Okay, like this, the accountant in me. So I decided to question: is my first reaction right, or am I not able for it? And I thought, no, you're well able for this. It's the budget. I live, sleep, and breathe the budget. I used to get my tax students to do the same. I'd been doing it for weeks and weeks before, be listening to everything, absorbing everything. And I thought, no, I'm as well informed as everybody else. Um, and I kind of looked at to see why my reaction was negative. And I think there was a fear that what if someone asks you something that is very complicated, but you have a great general knowledge, but you're not, that complicated area isn't your area of expertise. And then I went, sure, we can't all be experts in every
Yeah,
single area. So um, once I suppose, confirmed or talked to myself, had a little chat with myself. And actually, that self talking is very important.
yeah,
Um, and so once I did a little chat with myself and said, no, you're just as well informed as everybody else, you're well able for this. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and it really was outside my comfort zone and agreed and signed up for it. And the feeling was just amazing. It's just this euphoria. You're so empowered that you have overcome something that was a little challenge for yourself. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And that felt great. But I also recognize that that's something that's going to happen time and again. And that's something that you have to watch. So I think the first step is to be very aware of it. And the research literature shows that unfortunately, women tend to suffer from self doubt and imposter syndrome more so than men. And it can affect us, as we can see, as we spoke about, by preventing us, progressing or taking on those opportunities. But the women in my study were great. They had overcome all of those instances of self doubt and they still were able to progress in their careers. The good news is that while it's there, it's something that we can recognize and
yeah,
overcome.
yeah. And it's great. And do you think there's, sorry, going a bit off topic now. Do you think there's an element of conditioning that happens from perhaps a very young age within society that pushes women to behave the certain way?
Probably. And I know you want to talk about some of those areas, but I think so. I think a lot of the things that come up in my studies are all very interlinked. Um, Funnily enough, say with self belief, and I said to you that women have high self belief. A lot of studies show women having lower self belief. And sometimes I feel that little bits of my research and reading all the research that possibly it's how we're treated maybe. And I know you talk about the undervaluation. It's all of those things maybe
Yeah,
tipping away over time. That just kind of maybe knock some of that self-belief. Do you know what I mean? So it's something we have to be very conscious of that we can keep improving it and sustain it throughout our lives.
yeah. And that's why the research you're doing is so important because I feel like many of the conversations around this are more subjective. And it's when we get that hard data to back it up and show that those patterns are there that it becomes a lot more powerful.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be taken more seriously, Leah.
Yes.
Interestingly, though, Leah, when you had said that, I don't think it's upbringing. And this is just a personal opinion. I
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
everybody will have different opinions, but all I can say in my study is the women had very supportive families. And
Okay.
some of the women were doing, say, accounting, started
Yeah.
accounting, when there was very few women maybe in their class, and some of them might have been, the only woman. And it might have been the most popular or
Yeah.
easy career path to take, and their families were very
Yeah.
supportive. So when we talk about the conditioning, I wonder, is it after maybe we've left school
Mm-mm.
and gone out to the real world that that conditioning maybe commences or whatever? So that's, I think, important for organizations maybe to be aware of as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's happening perhaps, and then within the cultures as well. Um,
Absolutely.
which I know happens today. I mean, I have friends that work within certain organizations and they have no women beyond a certain point within management.
Yeah.
And all the women are within support roles and more admin based roles. And it feels like the 60s or 70s, right? But it's actually
Yeah,
very realistic of what we still have today. And that's just the way it is,
absolutely.
which
And even in Ireland, we're very good, I think, at women at kind of board level.
yeah,
And it seems to be just the step below that women aren't, I suppose, progressing as much as we'd like to see. And in fact, one of the Grand Thornton studies showed that the level of women at that senior level had actually dropped between 23 and 24.
oh
So,
wow,
yep,
interesting.
very relevant.
Okay. And um yeah, so let's get into the research. The core findings. So your research reveals stark truths about why women remain underrepresented in senior roles. What were your key findings and what patterns emerged that surprised you the most when interviewing other women?
Okay. I suppose, so while I looked at the career progression as well, I was also looking at the self belief.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was interesting findings. Some findings supported findings that have been done in other research areas, and then some were a little different. So one of the findings was the importance of feelings and beliefs, positive feelings and beliefs, and how important they are not only to ourselves but within our careers, and also how important support and encouragement is for women. It's a massive factor. Um, Role models weren't hugely significant in my study, but it transpired that it's not that women don't value them, it's that they didn't have enough to
Mm,
actually help them. And interestingly, another research study found that women are influenced by either male or female role models.
yeah.
But my study showed that women needed to see other women. They loved to see men, but they needed to see other women succeed
Yeah.
to actually make them feel that, yes, I can succeed in that way also. So they felt that they were lacking in role model. Um, Also, as well, I suppose surprisingly today, I was surprised by this that gender bias is still very prevalent. It's very much in existence. Um, and also, what really surprised me was that most of these women had reached very senior roles and they had talked about various successes and achievements along the way. And research tells us that our successes and achievements should be a significant influence on our self belief, and which makes sense. The more we achieve, the more our self belief is improved. But that wasn't the case for these women.
Mm.
Um, so that really did surprise me. And I can talk because I know you'll be talking about bragging and we'll be talking about bragging. So I can bring that into the bragging
Yeah.
later on. So it's very relevant.
Amazing. Um, and yeah, like I think what you were saying, going back to the fact that that conditioning is perhaps happening when we enter the workplace, I think you're right. Like when I look back to my own experience, and I think of two key moments, and one was that I discovered I was a manager within retail, and I discovered that one of my team members who I was managing, the only male on the team, was earning the same money as me. Um, our boss was a woman. Then fast forward, not very long ago, again my manager was a woman, but I remember she would really the two men that were in the team, they're far less. She would really point out the successes that they would have, and often they were the same as what the rest of us were experiencing. But for
Oh,
some
wow.
reason, there was just this complete um, disconnect. I would try and self promote at times through emails and whatnot, but it
Yeah.
made absolutely no difference. So it was quite interesting how yeah, there's this complete level of bias happening. And she's not a bad person. I don't think she was actively doing this. But it was
Yeah,
just,
not aware of it. Yeah.
yes.
And I think there's a lot of research out there on women, say the women who have succeeded and pull the ladder up behind them. And also as well that they don't want to emphasize so much that they're a woman. So they might be harder on other
Mm,
women. And, but again, as you said, they're all biases that we're supposed to learn what our biases are and
yeah,
address them
yeah,
and overcome them. So yeah, that's something, there's a lot of work still to be done in organizations around that, I think.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then, sorry, I'm probably going off topic there a little bit. And then the gender bias reality. So let's talk about the gender bias that emerged from your interviews. You mentioned something that really struck me, that we never hear about men being treated differently because they might have young children. Can you expand on this invisible bias and how it impacts women in their careers?
Yes, most of the women talked about how when they apply for roles or progression, that being a woman can be a negative.
Yeah.
They felt that they had to, first of all, work harder, prove themselves more, and so on than men. And the argument about children, that seems to be a constant bias that women are experiencing. And funny enough, even the women in my study who didn't have children were still treated differently in case they did, if you like. Um, and that is a problem because, as I said, we don't get focused on the number of children that a man has, or
Yeah.
is he of the age where he'll be starting to have children and so on. It doesn't even come into the equation. And I had two women, and I thought it was funny afterwards. Well, not funny because it's a little stark as well, but two women said they started to highlight their age when they got to their mid-40s. So they were waving it as a flag to say that, no, I'm no longer
Yes.
of childbearing age. And as one of the women said, she felt awful doing it. She felt that she was like disloyal to women and switching sides, but that it was necessary for her within her
Yeah.
career. And funnily now, I just have a few things written down. 25 of my 31 women, so I did in-depth interviews with 31 women, and 25 of them either experienced or witnessed gender bias in the workplace. And what's, I suppose, difficult is that it can be very hard to recognize because it may be more subtle than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yes.
And a few studies, including Irish studies, have asked women, have you ever experienced gender bias? And sometimes the women have said no. But when the studies go into greater detail, particularly when they're interviews and they probe further, it transpires that yes, they did experience bias in various shapes or forms. I just want to see now if I have anything. Yeah, so the women felt that had they been men, while they progressed within their careers, they felt that because they were women, it took a lot longer and it was harder. And some of them talked about worse pay. And one of the women, she moved into her boss's role. And of course, she knew what salary her boss was on.
Yeah.
So she was going to do the same role. But as we all do, when we move into a role, usually the next person can improve it a little more and a little more. We
Yeah.
can all add an extra bit of value. So this girl, and any of the names I use are fictitious names.
Okay.
So Emer went into this role and she had ideas for improving it. But she wasn't given the same salary as her predecessor,
Mm.
who was a guy. And she went to her bosses and complained, and no way she wasn't getting it. So she agreed then to work for a year in the role to prove herself. So she did that and she introduced new initiatives and she was delighted going back after a year to have the salary conversation, and they refused her yet
Oh
again.
my gosh.
So yeah, so that was a difficult situation. And then she had got to the stage where she felt, I can't do any more here. I've done my best. And
Yeah.
she left and went to a lovely organization after that.
Yeah.
But yes, so the women did speak about bias. And I suppose what's very important is that if we perceive gender bias, it impacts our self-belief negatively.
Yeah.
And I had two women, just two examples I pulled out there. Helena, she was a senior executive in her organization, and she talked about how at board level, she was made to feel less deserving than her male counterparts, and it reduced her confidence. And Jane, she was the only woman on her SMT on her senior management team, and she felt that she was treated less respectfully. And again, she felt that that reduced her self-belief. So this was hard to hear because
Yeah.
these were really amazing women. It was hard to hear those stories.
Yeah.
But what was great to hear then was that while that gender bias can both reduce our self-belief and hinder our career progression, these women were able to talk about how they overcame it.
Mm.
Um, so one of the women, Elizabeth, again, she was the only, so there was a lot of being the only woman on the senior management
Yeah.
team. So she had three male counterparts. So when she joined the organization, she felt that they saw her as the little woman basically sitting in the corner. But Elizabeth decided she was going to fight this stereotype and she wasn't having any of it. So she developed her role. And when I spoke to her, she was then seen in the organization as the number two, second to the CEO.
Yeah.
So there was great, wonderful stories from the women about how they overcame the gender bias. So I think that's positive for people to know that it can be overcome,
Yes.
and it can be worked on, and we can still progress. Um,
Yeah.
not condoning it, but that we can still
No.
succeed, I suppose. Yeah.
And like you mentioned in what you were saying, that again, back to that knowledge is power, because when you go in knowing that these biases exist, and like you said, they can be quite invisible, and people don't realize that they're there and don't realize that they're
Yeah.
happening. And that's when it's worse, when you don't realize, because you're like,
Yes.
why am
Yeah.
I feeling this way? What's happening? And it eats away at you and like slowly puts you down. Whereas if you
Yeah.
know, you go in with the fire in the belly and you're like, okay, I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think our kind of women friends and colleagues are great maybe at helping us when we can't see it. Because you know the way sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, maybe. So yeah, I think those close to us might be good sometimes at maybe highlighting something if we're not fully aware of it. And then, as you say, once we're aware, we can deal with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Exactly. And that's why the education piece is so key. I drive my family mad every single day with
Thank God.
um, the support factor, which we were just touching off of. Your research highlights how crucial support and encouragement are for women, yet you found women often felt constantly excluded in workplace settings. Can you tell us more about this disconnect?
Yeah. So absolutely. So support was hugely important. Now I have to mention a few women, but very few, had extremely supportive organizations that sounded wonderful. And I suppose they should be held up as examples
Yes.
of what everybody would aspire to. But the vast majority of women in my study felt that they had little organizational support. Now, these women were 46 and above. And I purposely chose this cohort of women because they would have experience to draw from,
Yeah.
and they would be able to bring that experience into my research, which they did. So often they had a number of organizations that they'd worked for. So they had huge, vast experience to draw from. And yet still there was a lacking, I would say, of organizational support.
Yeah.
And Jill, one of the women, said that in general, her opinion was that she felt unsupported at her level. And she thinks that women aren't really expected to reach those senior levels. And when they do, basically, it's a man's world.
Mhm.
So the stories that the women told indicated that support comes from the informal networks within the organization. That's where it arises. But as women, they're excluded time and again. And there was different stories. Like Karen, one of my women, said, oh, that she watched men being invited to golf, to sports matches and drinking sessions. And she said, I sat there thinking, I'm here too. And then Jane, who I'd mentioned previously, found that sometimes meetings were being conducted at night time. So there'd be a session in the pub and there'd be
Yeah.
a meeting and a decision made out of it. And they'd come in and tell her the next day. Now she objected. She wasn't having any of it and told them that I should be there at those meetings and a member of the senior management team, but they
Yeah.
still happened. So these women felt that the informal networks were crucial for our career development, and being excluded from them really hindered them. But I think it's something that can be improved upon. So if we know that organizational support, as women, organizational support is very important to us, we can seek it. We can seek it now. If it's not forthcoming, we can make decisions about it, but we can seek it. And even if it's not forthcoming, the women in my study showed that we can get support from other sources. Okay, so whether it be partners, spouses, family, friends, our colleagues or whatever, we can get it from other sources too. So there is a learning, while, it's important to know and I suppose it may be lacking. At least if we're aware of it, we can do something about it.
Yes, so important. But like you said, the informal networks are really important. Like I know something that I've
Yeah,
experienced not very long ago, within the startup world was that I remember meeting two people in particular, close to a funding body, and most of their comments were about, oh, take lots of time now because I was pregnant at the time.
yeah,
And then after that, the conversations was always, the main questions was always about how's your family, how's the kids, but
yeah.
always told no, there won't be any funding basically available. And the
Oh,
bar was set very high. Like I was
yeah,
told over and over again that I couldn't come back to them unless I was at a certain point. But it was a bit of a chicken and egg because I needed money to get to the
yeah,
next stage. So it was like, how do I get any further? And
yeah. It's not.
I
Yeah.
spoke to other founders and they were like, no, we were not given that same bar. So it was just interesting
Wow.
how, and this
Yeah,
was all during informal conversations on the side. So
yeah.
like you said, that's so important, but it's also so invisible and so difficult to prove.
Put your finger on. Yeah,
Exactly, or
yeah,
take any further.
yeah. And also, if you, it's very difficult to highlight that you're being excluded from it, as you said, when
Yeah,
it's subtle.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then so where are we? Oh yeah. So, one of your most surprising findings was how women undervalue their own successes and achievements. This directly connects to why we need more bragging. Can you walk us through what you discovered and why women felt their achievements were less valued than their male counterparts?
Yeah. So as I said, I thought it was a very unusual finding that they didn't value the successes and achievements so much, that those successes and achievements didn't improve their self-belief, particularly when they were able to talk about a lot of successes and
Yeah.
achievements. So I suppose digging deeper into their stories, these women felt that they were constantly undervalued, that they and their achievements were constantly undervalued compared to their male colleagues. And I just kind of give you maybe two examples
Yeah.
there. And this is the one that I had on the RTE brainstorm article.
Oh,
So
yes.
Anna was a CEO in her organization. So when she went to other organizations with her male colleagues or managers, she was often asked to make the tea. So um, just that
Classic.
perception that, sure, as the woman, she must be the junior. And other women talked about, say, they're sitting in a meeting and they come up with an idea and it's either dismissed or ignored. But then a few minutes later, a man comes up with the same idea, but maybe we rewords it a little differently. And all of a sudden it's very accepted and it's an amazing idea. Um, so yeah, so again, I suppose, and this is probably, as I said, a lot of things link up. So the women felt that, again, that they were going to have to be twice as good, really, I suppose, to be valued within their organization. And what my study demonstration was, it was the constant undervaluation over time
Mm.
that seems to socialize the women to believe that they're less good, if you
Okay.
like, and in turn value their achievements
Yeah.
less.
Mm.
Um, so I feel that that's kind of a personal effect, but then there's also the professional impact as well, because it's going to hold us back from self-promotion. If we don't value our successes and achievements, well, then how are we going to self-promote or brag about them?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, it's such a good point. And there is that social conditioning, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
workplace social conditioning that's obviously taking place. And again, when it's invisible or when it's subtle and you don't realize,
yeah,
it can have a huge impact, especially when we're younger, right? I mean, I remember, I don't think it was until I was in my 30s that all of a sudden I became woke. I know that's meant to be a
yeah,
bad word, but I really started to recognize as all this the subtle biases that were happening around me, not only from a gender but from a race perspective.
yeah,
I have family members from Ethiopia, and it's a difficult one
yeah.
to prove, to give concrete data on. So it's
Yeah,
amazing.
because sometimes you can't even really verbalize it yourself, because if
Mm,
it's very small, but I suppose if it's constant,
yes.
yeah. But as you said, I fully agree with you about the age thing. I think now hopefully we can help, younger women maybe realize things sooner. But yeah, I would probably personally agree with you that, you probably need a little bit of experience at times to recognize issues. But look, I think the more we talk about things as well,
Yeah.
we're creating more awareness out there and hopefully helping other people.
I think so too, right? And it's about bringing the men in on this journey as well and having everybody together, and then eventually hopefully to
Yeah.
see this happening within many different areas, like race, or like coming from a underrepresented group, or coming from a background with less what's the word, finances. Like all of these things
Absolutely.
can have
Yeah.
an impact.
Yeah.
um
Oh, when you say men there, my dad is one of the best advocates for women.
oh There you go. My husband is great as well. He's always teaching me how to
Brilliant.
negotiate and saying like, "What are you doing? Why? Like, why are you
Yeah.
doing this?"
And
So
there is
yes,
loads of that out there. We just need to channel more of them.
I think so too, and start early. Um, okay, so other Irish studies found that women. Wait, am I on the right question? Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Other Irish studies found that women believe their work should speak for them. As you mentioned previously, while men actively self-promote. Your study on female accountants supports this findings, even when the women were better experienced. Can you tell us about the career benefits of bragging that your research supports? Do you think that these patterns are even more pronounced for female entrepreneurs who constantly need to pitch themselves and seek funding?
Yeah. So the women in my study as senior managers were able to talk about the women on their teams. And yes, they felt that they saw that the women on their teams weren't great bragging. Even when they were amazing, they still weren't great at bragging. So they could see a difference in general again. And because remember, it's only generally because we're all going
Yes.
to have, it's going to be exceptions. Um, Whereas they found that men just seemed to have a tendency to brag more. And as you mentioned that study, that's an Irish study by Christine Cross.
Okay.
And yes, so her study found that women felt that why should we have to brag? Our work should speak for
Mm,
us. And the women in my study said the same thing. They felt that the hard work is being done and that should reap the rewards. Um, but as managers, they were very clear that people needed to put themselves out there because if organizations aren't aware of it, and let's face it, if that's the way it's being done in the organization, if that's the way, if we talk about organizations that are, there's more men in senior
yeah.
roles, and if that's what they think is normal, well, that's what they believe is true, I suppose. Um, so they're not going to realize that, oh, yes, that woman sitting quietly there, she's a wonderful worker. She's not talking about it. So maybe she's not actually achieving anything. So the women were very clear in my study that we need to brag, we need to make
Yes.
organizations aware of it. And we do see that. We see often that people who are more vocal are those that achieve success,
Mm.
regardless, I suppose, of the ability behind that. And Christine Cross's study was the same. She found in her study that men were better at self-promoting
Yes.
and it paid dividends. They got promoted. It helped their career development. So I think basically the story that the women really, or the message that the women gave was that women need to be better bragging. And I would definitely agree with you that it's even more important for female entrepreneurs. Um, it's not the area that I work in.
Yes.
It's a totally different area, but they're pushing themselves out there all the time. They're developing their business and looking for new contracts, looking for funding or partnerships or whatever. They're constantly pushing themselves out there that in other careers, we mightn't have to do it quite so much. Um, so yes, so it's something that they really need to be good at and clear on. Um, I had thought of something there that I forgot.
No problem.
Anyway, it's something that we can learn how to do. And I suppose I felt that a little bit recently, kind of stepping into the area where I'm trying to set up my own business.
Yeah.
And that probably will be the biggest challenge that I would have had that probably didn't realize it. I thought that, you can learn to do it here and there, but no, I think you need to be able to brag all the time,
Yeah.
no matter where you are. And actually funny, I remember years ago being at a talk that Bill Cullen gave, and he said that he used to go to the same restaurant all the time. And then he found out that somebody was buying a car and they bought it elsewhere. And he said, Did you not know that, like, I have my own, I'm head of Renault. And they said, no, no, no. And you realize that that's it. You need to
Yeah.
be putting yourself out there everywhere. It's
Yeah.
not just when you decide, oh, I need to contact that company. Everybody is a potential contact. So I think it's very important for female entrepreneurs, definitely.
It's so true. And I know even just from speaking to someone last year that works in an accelerator program, where they give funding as well, and she was explaining that when they get applications from female founders, they usually have to dig to find out more of the data around their wins. Whereas often when they're with the guys, they have to look under the hood to find out what numbers are actually not, or have been somewhat inflated. So
Yeah.
they often saw that difference. But at least
It's amazing the different approach. And you see, when there's differences, we can learn from the differences. Do you know,
yes,
whatever differences are between people, we can learn and we can take more of the good. Do you know what's working? So yeah, very interesting.
yeah, exactly. But this is why we need diversity, because then you get diversity of thought and approach, and things end up being more successful. Um, Okay, so solutions and impact. You're not just identifying problems, but you're actually creating solutions for them, which is amazing. So tell us about the training workshops that you're developing to help women overcome self doubt, achieve high self belief, and learn to brag about their successes. I know that these skills are absolutely crucial to female entrepreneurs.
So when I started out on my journey in late 2019, starting my doctoral studies, I wanted to
Yeah,
help women, as I said, improve their self-belief. And I feel that now, I suppose, I'm better informed.
yeah,
And I also want to help them now overcome the various barriers. I kind of count them as barriers that they encounter, whether they're coming from externally or internally.
yeah,
And these barriers that I see are self-doubt, not bragging enough. So,
yeah,
so my training is around overcoming, recognizing first of all, and overcoming self doubt, learning how to brag,
yeah,
and that's kind of over time. Um, Developing your positive feelings and beliefs, because my research has shown how important that is. How to source female role models if they're not readily available, and how to seek support, whether it's from organizations and it doesn't come from organizations, how to seek it from alternative sources, and how to appreciate your own successes and achievements. So to value your own successes and achievements, how to work smarter, because I think we fall into a trap often of working harder and harder and
mm,
harder. And that work mightn't actually be helping our careers to develop. And
yeah,
so how to work smarter, how to build authentic networks. And so meaningful networks as opposed to, I mean, we have our friendships as well, okay, but networks that actually work for us.
yes,
And yeah, and how to stop being so hard on ourselves.
mm,
To know the seeking perfection.
yeah,
Why do we do that? It's very time consuming and it's very negative. So yeah, so they're all kind of mini areas. I've developed a half day self belief workshop. So it's to talk about the four factors that influence your self belief and to really understand them and to tap into them because maybe we're not utilizing all of them. And my studies show that we're not. So to get the best out of all of them so we can improve our self belief and then to be able to sustain that throughout our lives. Yes, there might be challenges or attacks to our self belief, but we can keep bringing it back. And if we have more control and understand it more, and then looking at career progression workshops and looking at the big picture so that kind of starting out where you have a goal that you want to progress and develop within your career. So they're the areas that I'm
amazing.
looking at. So I really want to bring my career and my academic and my personal experience to coach women.
Yeah,
I'd like them, and the goal is that to self develop,
yeah,
um, for women to self develop, I should say, to maximize their self belief, and then to reach their potential, whether it be in the workplace or whether it be in other aspects of their lives. Um, like yourself, I
yeah.
just think women are wonderful, and I really would love to see them going around showing the world, I suppose, how wonderful they really are.
Yes, exactly. And have a more diversity of solutions, which is what we need, right? For a better world,
Absolutely,
a better
yeah,
world.
and be happier on the journey too.
Yeah, this is it. Oh, very excited and very, very needed. Um, but I could go off on a tangent on
I know, same here.
on different things. Okay, so organizational change. What advice do you have for organizations that want to create environments for women to feel empowered to self promote? And this could be very relevant for startups as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's the kind of, I suppose, environment you want to create
Yeah.
too. I think, okay, and a little bit maybe sidetracked, but I think recognizing differences in people. I think sometimes with our quest for equality, sometimes there's a tendency to see everybody, okay, yes, see everybody the same, but we're not the same. We
Mm,
treat everybody equally, but we also have to recognize our differences because we can't help people unless we understand what their differences are and celebrate their differences. And as you said, when we recognize differences, we can actually see what works and what doesn't work.
mm,
So I just think personally that's important. I would love to see organizations truly valuing and appreciating individuals. I know the world we live in today is cutthroat and we're all working so hard. And I
mm,
think we've lost some of that people side.
yeah.
So really valuing and appreciating individuals. And we know how, like the women in my study talked about how when they gave something to their employee or, and helped them a little to manage their personal lives, they got that back in spades.
Yeah.
So it's for organizations to really it's very basic. We all know that, but why don't organizations, I suppose, focus a little more? Um, to include everybody in all the informal happenings and undertakings and events and to make sure that they're included. So that really needs a conscious effort to look and see um, the woman in my study, oh, look at her. She wasn't at that. Why was
Yeah.
she left behind? And so to address that, to provide training to teach people to value their successes and achievements, because we've seen that the women in my study could do that more. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would agree the same. And
Mm,
it goes without saying to provide training to deal with unconscious bias. That really goes without saying.
yeah.
To invite them. So maybe on a more, to invite individuals to be forthcoming. So sometimes I think the language that we use is a little tricky. It could be, and I have experience of this before Christmas at work. We were told about excellent areas of excellence. And I just hate that term, excellence. Why can't we just tone it down a little bit? It could be just good. So to invite people to contribute, maybe to initiatives that they're implementing or ideas that they
Mm,
have, or it could be failures. It could be something that we tried but didn't work, because
yeah.
that's a great learning story as well. So to invite individuals to contribute and then to maybe distribute that throughout the organization, whether it's in newsletters or get togethers or nights out or a regular meeting, could be a happy meeting that we're going to celebrate
Yeah.
individuals. Um, to make something, I think, of individuals and what they do and to showcase them. Now, some individuals won't put themselves forward, they're shyer or whatever, and then maybe we could get colleagues to nominate these individuals or to talk about what those individuals did. So it's all about bringing people together and showcasing. And I think
Mm,
everyone needs an opportunity to be showcased,
yeah.
whether it's by them themselves or by somebody else. Rather than pushing people into a spot doing something that they would hate to do, maybe other people could showcase their colleagues. And I think everyone needs to be included and be very careful on this, because some people are very strong and they will dominate
Mm,
and they will take over, this initiative. Whereas make sure that everybody gets an equal spot and encourage those who are less forthcoming. I think they will be kind of my top
yeah.
ideas anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I remember an organization that I used to work in previously did a lot of getting everybody to put themselves forward, and it was just really, really nice culture to be in from that perspective. It was, yeah, it was
That's
great.
fantastic, isn't it? I love hearing those stories. It's great because, yeah, we could really learn. You'd love to put that organization, into a conference
Yeah,
to that.
definitely. Um, and then, okay, so let's see. So before we wrap up, I want to practice. I want you to get practice what you preach. So can you give us one big brag about your research, your impact, or something that you're incredibly proud of? That's your biggest hope for how this research will transform women's careers.
Okay. I believe my research is important. I think it's very powerful. And I think it's hugely relevant in today's world. I'm so proud of it, and I'm so proud of achieving my doctorate because I went into it with self-doubt. I thought that I was never good at English essays in school. I struggled. When we're told to do 3 pages, I will be struggling with 2. And I said, how in God's name am I going to write the equivalent of a book? And will I be able to sustain it for 5 years? So I'm really proud that I did. And I'm
Amazing.
so proud that I'm delighted that I loved it as well. Also, as well, little brag for others. I'm so proud of the wonderful women that took in my study. I was so impressed and blown away by them. Also, I did female expert reviewer and 2 pilot interviewees. So they were all wonderful. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And most importantly, the personal aspect, my daughter, my mother, my sister, they're amazing, strong women. So all of these people influence us hugely and impact us very positively. I really love my research, as I said, and I hope that it would be able to help other women to overcome barriers, achieve goals, and really importantly, I think, to reach our potential, whatever that may be. We all have different potential. And again, whether it be in the workplace or within other aspects of our lives. And so that's, I suppose, the impact that I would like it to have.
Amazing. And just to get another brag in there for you, that you were featured in an RTE article back in November, was that?
Yeah, just early December. Yeah,
Or early
yeah,
December, yeah, which
yeah.
is an amazing brag. I mean, that's how I found you. So yeah, I think it's really, really awesome to have your work put across the nation like that. And
Thank you.
then so how can oh no, sorry, where am I now? Oh yeah, because we finished, we changed one of the questions, didn't we? So let's see. So yeah, let's get super practical
Mhm.
for the entrepreneurs who are listening, for the women that are listening. And I know that a lot of your work is for people that are within employment, but I think it's all so relevant. Being an entrepreneur is still, you're still
Yeah,
in a sense in a job, just a different type of job. Uh,
absolutely, absolutely.
so, yeah, so for women listening who think, I don't know how to brag, what's your advice for getting started? So yeah, let's start with that because I think I have a couple of questions here in the one.
Okay.
So let's start with that one.
Okay, so I made a couple of notes on this.
Nice.
So I would say make a list of your achievements, first
Mhm.
of all. And then when you've made your list of your achievements, go to those close to you, those supportive people
Yeah.
in your circle, and ask them to increase that list because they have other achievements that you haven't even thought of. Because we're very good at saying, that's not really achievement. That's just a normal thing that we did. But no, so make a list of all the achievements. So going to others will help you capture everything. And as you go on, keep adding to that list of achievements. So it's always there.
Yeah.
Have a little notebook or whatever, even not on your phone, a little notebook somewhere that's and because I think it'll make you feel good knowing that, oh, wow, it's growing all the time. The second thing then would be to prepare. So to prepare little brags, like I suppose similar maybe to elevator pitches or whatever.
Yeah.
So prepare little brags and then practice them. So practice them with those that are close, first of all, those good people in your life. And look for feedback and look for critique and look for challenge on them because that's what we're going to get in the real world. So you'll be better prepared. And the more you're practicing anyway, you're building your confidence, I think.
Mm.
And it's very important to project confidence. So I think
Yeah.
fake it till you make it. I think we all have to do that in so many aspects of life. And begin to recognize or talk yourself into recognizing and believing in your greatness and successes. If you're setting up your own business and you're an entrepreneur, you are wonderful already and before you've even started. It's a really brave thing to do. So start actually recognizing that. And as I said, believing it in yourself. And again, you might have to fake it initially and eventually practice will, I suppose, change your mindset and make you more confident. Stop comparing yourself to others. Stop trying to be perfect. That's a pet hate. You're at the top of your game. And you just need to be going around telling everyone that. And also, I've made a note here to watch
Yeah.
the words you use. So to lose any of those words, like, I think I could do this, I will, and I can, and I am. So it's all very assertive. Um, and then I'd say thirdly, set targets,
Yes.
periodic targets, maybe that I'm going to do. So say we have this goal that such a pitch is going to be very uncomfortable, maybe. and we have to do so many of them. Now, depending on the area, so set a goal periodically, whether it be once a month, maybe once a quarter, once a month, once a fortnight, once a week, whatever is appropriate, but set it periodically so you keep doing it and putting yourself and challenge yourself by doing something uncomfortable. And I do think that the more you do it, the better you become, and the more that you believe in yourself. I really think that comes across. So project confidence until you actually feel that confidence.
Just make it happen.
Absolutely.
And then, okay. No, I think you answered all these questions. Did you? Did you answer all of these questions, or do we also go
Well,
your advice for
well,
getting started?
see, it doesn't go well. I feel, okay, so
Yeah.
when you're out there putting yourselves forward, okay, I hand on heart to think the vast majority of people are really good-hearted and kind. And I think it'll mostly be met positively.
Yes.
But every so often, it's going to be met negatively. There's a few people, okay, and as an entrepreneur, I think you're going to face maybe once in a blue moon, maybe a little bit of begrudgery or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it doesn't go well and you have a negative audience or whatever, I would listen to what they're saying, first of all. Okay. Instead of maybe becoming too defensive too quickly, or instead of becoming upset, because this is business, I'd listen to what's being said and analyze it and think, is there anything in there that's justified? It might be a tiny bit, even if there's a tiny bit that's true and justified, park it because it's something maybe that can help you later on.
Yeah.
But if the negative reaction is unjustified, I would be very calm and I'd think about what I was going to say before I say it, and I would calmly explain why they're wrong
Yeah.
and what my organization is doing
Yeah.
and how my business can help you or your organization or you personally or whatever. And also as well, because you're on the spot, you might feel that I can, once you've done that, you could say, and actually I take your criticisms on board, and I'd like to maybe do another little bit of work to demonstrate to you how I feel that you're wrong. You're wrong. So maybe you might need to come back a second time with that. So maybe leave yourself a little bit of space to do that. And then finally, I think if it's all pure negative, and you don't agree with it, and you've tried and tried again to change their mindset, and they're not having any of it, I would say park it. And is there anything to learn? If there is, great. If there's nothing to learn, park it and don't spend a moment more worrying about it and move on and put that down as another achievement that you overcame that horrible obstacle. So
But yes, it's so true. Like I remember on a number of occasions when I was pitching, the fact that my team was remote and in different locations, I had pushback often because they were saying that, oh, but you need to be in the same room because you need to be working the 10, 12 hours a day. You know, you need to be getting like all that bouncing ideas off each other and whatnot. I was like, that's not my reality. I have two small children. For me, working remotely is my reality. And while sometimes, yes, it can be more difficult, we know many organizations that are very successful working remotely because you just have to come up with certain strategies to do so. But it wasn't comfortable pushing back.
Yeah.
It definitely was not comfortable.
But then probably I think the more you do it and the more, when you believe in yourself and what you're selling or pitching, I think it's easier and possibly, and I suppose a bit of practice as well. Like I think probably experience helps. I think okay, when someone points out the negatives, there's always going to be positives to balance it out. Of course, there's negatives to every situation. And in your case, like COVID showed that the world was still able to operate remotely and very successfully. So, I just think I always just counter it with the positives, accept the negatives, but the positives outweigh the negatives.
Yeah, I like that pushback. That's a good one. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. I always like to kind of end this by doing a little brag for the guest. So I'll do that, just put you on the spot. No, just look, I think it's amazing. I mean, this is something you've been working on now for 6 years, since 2019. You've gone all the way through to getting a doctorate. That's correct, right? You've gone all the way through to getting a doctorate, which is absolutely amazing. You've done this incredible research to really put, I think, the data behind something that's quite, as we discussed, quite complex and difficult to put your finger on because it is something that's so subtle and socially acceptable in a sense. that people don't realize. I think that's what makes it even more, sometimes even when I'm talking about it with you, I feel uncomfortable because I'm like, wait, this is like, how do we put our finger on it, right? So you're putting data against something that's a very socially complex, which is just incredible. You know, you've been featured on the RTE, which is incredible, and now you're taking the plunge and starting your own business, which is also an incredible brag. So to throw that back at you. So yes, I'm just really, really excited, and to see where all of this is going. And just yeah, big thank you for, coming on the brag today and sharing your research and doing some bragging.
Delighted to do it, and thanks a million for having me on.
You're so welcome. All